After a failed attempt to get a $500 million bailout from the US government, Spirit Airlines is officially closing for good. This comes after their second bankruptcy filing, and it's been confirmed that rising fuel costs are what pushed the airline to extinction. Spirit made this announcement on Saturday, March 2nd, 2026, and said that they were starting an orderly wind down effective immediately. Customers reported that soon thereafter, they were not able to get in contact with Spirit customer service because they had already been disbanded. When a major industry player fails like this, it leaves a lot of people asking the question, how does this happen? If you were around in 2008, you likely remember the phrase too big to fail being applied to banks. What that meant is the bank was so big that if it were to fail, it would create irreparable damage to the economy and the industry as a whole. Therefore, if the bank were to fail, it would take the economy right with it. That's where things like bailouts come into play. The government will step in to make sure that industries or the economy are not damaged to that extent, to the point where it is impacting people worldwide. However, this is where perspectives differ. In theory, no one company or bank should be so large that it would have such an impact. And in industries where it may make more logistical sense for an entity to operate at such a large level, that's where people feel like the government should come into play to either own that area or have very high regulations. Again, in theory, it's because you want them to operate properly. This was historically the case with the airline industry. But in 1978, Congress passed a law allowing airlines to set their own fares and routes. This began the deregulation of the airline industry. At the time, one of the biggest arguments in favor of this was because it would allow more players to enter the game and therefore lower fare prices. While that is what it did initially, a lot of people said this was a wolf in sheep's clothing, assuming that in this place of deregulation, it could also have the opposite effect. At the time, airlines were competing based on service, and so a lot of them did cut fares while keeping their service standards high. It wasn't until Southwest Airlines entered the game with their no-frills model that the airline industry started to shift away from being focused on luxury service. Decades later, those concerns came to fruition with the airline industry that most of us know today, not focused on service while still having very high fares. It wasn't until airlines like Spirit or Frontier came to the game saying, hey, we're going to be upfront and say we're not going to give you great service, it's not going to be about the frills, but we're also not going to be charging you an exorbitant amount of money. It looks like, unfortunately for Spirit, they were not able to execute that model effectively. Let me know your thoughts and experiences with the airline industry in the comments.